Here we go. Okay, we're back. We're live. It's 2 o'clock, and we're going to do a special discussion of a program that we have scheduled as one of our luncheon panel programs on May 21st, Thursday, a couple of weeks away, which is called Public Spaces in Hawaii. How can we preserve them, retain them, regain them? What do we do with public spaces here? And it's really an important subject. And we have a very important guy to talk about how they have been evolving over the past generation or two. He's not that old. And you know, what we can do about it. And that's Ben Lee, the city manager under
Jeremy Harris.
Yes. And he's now with Clifford Planning and Architecture. But the important thing is he's been responsible for the development of a number of public spaces and other projects in Honolulu. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you, Jay. Very much. Very nice to be here.
Thanks for coming down. So we're going to call this the State of Public Spaces, and it will be an interesting sort of introduction to what you, as one of the speakers at our luncheon program on May 21, might say, and it'll sort of warm us up on the issues. Let me also mention that if anybody out there wants to tweet, you can tweet us at ThinkTech HI, okay? And if you want to ask a question or make a comment, we'll certainly read that on the air. Okay, so I guess first I would ask you, what is the state, Ben, of public spaces in Hawaii, both Honolulu and the outer islands, neighbor islands?
Well, we're gonna have to maybe go back when I was managing director, and it was a great time from I think 1998 to 2004, and we did a lot of things about public spaces, but the public spaces needs to be used and enjoyed by the general public, whether it's residents and visitors, and that's what brings the people together. And I think Jeremy Harris and I and the entire cabinet feel that it's a celebration of life. We walk our streets, we walk the mall, we go through our parks, and the soccer moms are out at our YPO soccer complex and Central Oahu Park or Patsy Mink Park. Those things are really major important public spaces. Kapilani Park, and our forefathers who designed Ala Moana Beach Park, thank goodness for that, right? Look how wonderful that is as you drive along Ala Moana Boulevard, and all of a sudden it opens up to the ocean. And that's what we miss a lot, is driving along and seeing the ocean, right?
Yeah.
We connect to the water. Yeah. What's the state of our public spaces? We did a lot. I mean, we pushed that envelope pretty hard. As I mentioned, we
Jeremy Harris was into that. He had training in that area?
Well, he was
a planner, wasn't he?
He has a master's degree in marine biology, and also a master's degree in urban ecosystems.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Right. And he was very, very passionate about how our city looks. And yes, the laws and the bills and the ordinances and the potholes and the bus shelters, they're all very important. I don't want to, say anything less about the importance of that. But our city works and looks good because people use it and say, hey, this is neat, right? This is something new. Some of the things that we did in Waikiki was, we said that Waikiki is for residents as well as for visitors. And for the longest time, before it was kind of fixed up, tuned up, and given a whole new look in widening the beach, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, was that, most residents says, oh yeah, Waikiki, I never go down there. Too crowded, hard to park, too many tourists, and not for us. And we said, no, we need to change that, right? And how do we change that? Well, we closed down Kalakaua Avenue once a month and did brunch on the beach. We had tables and chairs, and all the folks thought we were nuts. And we got a lot of complaints. So we said, oh, you're just gonna log jam traffic and so forth. And then we said, well, we just don't want to sit on the asphalt paving. We want to put AstroTurf on. He said, really? You're gonna put AstroTurf on the entire street? And we did that. And we said, well, I don't want just plain old tables and chairs. We want umbrellas, bright, colorful blue umbrellas, and tablecloths. And everybody says, you got to be kidding, right? But we did that, and we had all the chefs, and we had a wonderful partnership with Waikiki Improvement Association, all the hotel owners, the Hyatt, the Sheraton, the Hilton, Dukes, and they provided breakfast or
sure.
brunch, and they cooked. And we had a couple of dignitaries try to, do an omelet or two for us. And so forth. But the
That's
first
a nice
time,
touch.
yeah, the first time they were very skeptical, and it was such a success that we just did it month after month, and basically the hotelers and operators made some money, and this is, boy, you certainly surprised us.
Yeah.
But that's basically having our residents sit down with visitors and share a breakfast or an omelet and so forth. And we have wonderful, wonderful Hawaiian entertainment. And I think that's what is really important, is that people come to Hawaii, and we've always said, when I was the planning director in 1990, it's more than sun, sand, and surf. They're looking at something where they can tell a story when they go back home. And we're competing internationally around the world about, hey, I went to Waikiki, the world famous Waikiki Beach, and before we fixed it up, it was pretty bad shape in 1990. And so we did the brunch on the beach. We had wonderful entertainment. Jake Shimabukuro, Naleo, Makaha Sons. I mean, it was great stuff.
Gave them exposure too.
Right. So then we pushed the envelope one more thing. So it would be great to be able to show movies on the beach. And everybody kind of said, no, you're really, are you really serious about it? Yeah, we're on a big screen. We want to show first run, or at least recent run movies on the beach, and so that residents and visitors are sitting side by side and says, oh, you live here? What do you know? So I'm from Australia, or I'm from Europe. I'm here visiting and such, and they share stories. But the kids were there, and the kids, when they grow up, is going to say, I remember when I had popcorn and bento lunches, and we
Watch the movie.
watched the movie Harry Potter, or
Yeah, really.
So it was good, and it was wonderful, and it was well attended.
And it was free.
And it was free, and the city picked up a lot of the costs. But my feeling is that people don't mind if we spend the money on benefiting our residents and our visitors. So those are two big things that we did in Waikiki, and it had a lot of traction. I think it was in the Washington Post that says, hey, guess what Waikiki and Honolulu is doing? They're showing movies on the beach. So
Didn't you also, my timeline could be wrong about this, but there's a couple things I remember in that period. I think it's that period. Bricks, red bricks.
Right.
On the streets, new design of streetlights.
Right.
Was that you too?
The bricks were back in the 70s.
Okay.
And it was a little dated. And so we actually ripped out all those brick pavers and do a more, let's say, a hospitality type of feeling, where we're using a quartzite or quartz stone.
That's what I'm talking about.
On
Yeah,
the sidewalk.
it was a new
Right.
look.
We took away all those, what the mayor used to say, well, they're cigar box fixtures, right? They look like they haven't been painted, they're orange, and there's this big tall box, and we took all those down, and we put the historic lamp posts with flower baskets on either side, because wonderful cities like Victoria and even Portland, they maintain it, and it looks great when people come here. Flowers and something that's
It's a signature.
just,
You remember.
Welcome to Waikiki. Right?
Yeah.
And then we went one step further. Another great public space, which we're very proud of, is we tore down that old bunker-looking bandstand at Kapilani Park, and we created a Victorian bandstand, a copper roof and the like.
That's been well used ever since.
It's been wonderful, right? Yeah. And that was the home for a Royal Hawaiian Band. And I says, oh my gosh, So when we finished it, we put the reflecting pond, and all of Kapiolani Park used to be underwater, right? So it basically brought back a little bit of history in kind of a very contemporary way, but basically well used by every festival, Honolulu Festival, Okinawan Festival, a lot of activities, all the fundraising walks, whether it's for cancer research, heart fund, and so forth, they all kind of centered around.
So that you've identified a few lessons to dwell on. I mean, one is it should be interesting, and it should cause people to gather, be a magnet for them. You should let them relate to each other, let them have an opportunity to say hello. It should be creative, and that means taking risk.
Right.
You know, and you did. You took risks a number of times. But I think, you know, the lesson is it's worth taking the risk, whether it actually, you know, plays out the way you want or maybe in another way, but still you took the risk because you never achieve good public space without taking a certain risk. It's not a cookie cutter. It's got to be different every time. It's got to be creative every time. Yeah?
And it needs to be fun. And that's, you know, when we first did a lot of these events, you know, our city folks, and then they're all volunteers, a lot of volunteers, a lot of, you know, very, very loyal city workers. They says, you know, is this going to really work? You know, and we're going to get up 5 o'clock in the morning, put AstroTurf down on the street, or we're going to clean up after the movies on the beach and so forth. And they saw the wonderful response from the general public and the visitors. And I think, you know, they said, I got it. You know, I think this is a good thing. You know, our city streets are important. Landscaping our city streets.
Well, you put trees down, didn't you?
That's right.
In Kuhio.
On Kuhio
and
Avenue.
Luffy Hanneman, you know, immediately took them out again. Right?
He took some trees out.
I could never figure that out.
I didn't understand that. We placed them close together because we know judiciously as they grow, we would, you know, remove some. But, you know, here we are spending, you know, whether it's $10, $20 million in improving the street and widening the sidewalks. And what we did there is we took out a traffic lane. And here again, we took out a traffic lane on Kalakaua Avenue to widen the beach because we can't go out in the ocean and we're losing sand all the time. Yeah. So we took out that middle traffic lane and widened the sidewalk so it's pedestrian friendly. And you know, it's like people first, cars second, public transportation, actually public transportation second, and cars third, where it was kind of back-asswards, right? We dedicated 5 lanes of for the cars, and the people were working along, you know, 4-foot wide sidewalks and dodging, you know, lampposts and things like that.
We're going to take a short break,
sure.
Ben. That's Ben Lee. He's the former city manager of Honolulu and put a lot of things into play, took a lot of, you know, interesting, creative, risky things he did, and, you know, so far our discussion shows they worked out. He's now with Clifford Planning and Architecture. Here on Sustainable Hawaii, we're talking about the state of our public spaces in anticipation of a program by that name that ThinkTech is doing as part of a downtown forum on May 21st at Laniakea. If you want to sign up for that, it's thinktechhawaii.com. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I host Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii, and I do this because I care about science literacy in Hawaii. I want to spread the understanding that science is a vital and interesting part of everyone's life. I want to make sure the broadest possible spectrum of people understand the beauty and the value of science and realize that science plays out each and every day of their lives. I want you to understand that science is fun. So we bring onto this show each week guests who are scientists, from astronomers to zoologists, and we talk about what they do and how they do it. But most importantly, we talk about why you should care about their work, why you should see that their work has value and impact on your life. So I hope you'll join us Fridays, 1 p.m. here on ThinkTech Hawaii. You can watch us via live stream. You can watch us recorded on Olelo, and you can see us each week. We hope you'll join us.
Okay, we're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech, Sustainable Hawaii. We're talking about the state of our public spaces, very important, more important than you realize for life in Honolulu and elsewhere in the state. With Ben Lee, who's now with Clifford Planning and Architecture. He is an architect, and he was a city manager under Jeremy Harris. And he had a lot to do with public spaces in that period of time. So Ben, you know, what's the magic sauce? I mean, you alluded to it earlier. It draws people in. It gives them a place to gather. But some spaces, you know, work and some places don't. I'll give you an example. Tamarind Park.
Exactly.
Glenn Miura designed that. He's going to be on this panel too.
That's good.
He's really proud of that space. And, you know, it works, even though it's like private public space owned by a private company, but it's dedicated by contract, I guess, by the way they set it up, to use by the public. But then you have across the street, you have Financial Plaza, which could be the Sahara Desert. I mean, you just want to cross it. You don't want to spend any time there. And then I'll give you one other thought. You know, I went to a local wedding in Florence, okay? And not too far from the Duomo in the center of Florence, there's a little park. I can't remember the name, but it was a plaza, you know, and it was all green grass and some windy paths through it, just flat, with low benches, low concrete, wide benches, a couple of churches, a couple of ice cream gelato places, some shops, some small hotels. This place was filled 24 hours. Something in that park drew people to spend time there. They wanted to be there. They wanted to take a nap. They wanted to play with the dog or the kid. They wanted to lie down in the grass and read the newspaper. I mean, it was, you know, totally charming. Okay, and so to me, that's instructive about how you do this. And conceivably, if you follow the rules from Florence in front of Financial Plaza of the Pacific, you have a much different, you know, result. Thoughts?
That's correct. And those are great examples, and I've been to Florence, and I know that little park. You know, the major difference between Tamarind Park and Financial Plaza is, one, there's trees, and there's grass, and there's, you know, places to sit and relax, have a cup of coffee. Food is magical.
Yes, absolutely.
Food is magical.
Even a little food, any food.
Right. If you have coffee or a donut or lunchtime, you know, that park is filled with people. And people can have casual conversation, and it's a meeting place. Hey, let's have, you know, I'm really busy. I'll meet you at Tamarind Park and we'll grab a sandwich. And then if you go across the street, you know, it's not the same. And actually across the street from Financial Plaza is that platform that's raised up. And that's not very friendly either. Whenever you raise something and you have to walk up steps, yeah, that's not as.
This is First Hawaiian you're talking about?
I think it's, yeah, First Hawaiian, the gold nerd class.
It's an impediment. You know, it says, leave me alone, go away. Right.
And, you know, it took quite a bit of effort for, at the time when Glenn and I worked on the Bishop Square project, Northwestern Mutual basically was the owner, and it took some doing for the owners to say, you know, I think it would be great to just provide a park for the people, and it worked. And, you know, those large trees are there because we took out parking stalls below so that the roots can go, you know, another 8 or 10 feet
is that
down.
Right?
So it, you know, it
that's
always,
really thinking ahead, yeah.
Always looks good, you know, at Christmas time and so forth.
It's really
so, and then there are some spaces in downtown which are not as successful because they don't quite have the same, you know, the greenery makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that you were in, you know, Seabrew building. There's a little patch of green and a little respite where people can go and feel comfortable and safe. And I think architects and planners can take a lesson from that as they're doing, you know, new buildings. And the First Hawaiian Bank across the street is pretty, you know, cold, and not enough places for people to sit and enjoy, where the plaza now becomes energized, and that becomes the signature and the landmark of the building. Yeah. Not so much the architecture, but the open space and the public space.
Part of it, right?
Right. Oh, it's all.
It's the human side of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But you know, what's the name of that? Montpellier. I don't know why I keep referring to France or Europe. Montpellier. It's on the Mediterranean. It's on the east side, close to the Spanish border, and in the center of Montpellier, there is a huge square, huge, but it is worth every penny that it costs to maintain this very huge square. Why? Because there are coffee shops and restaurants around the square, and the chairs and tables spill into the square. There are virtually thousands of chairs and tables, and you know, and waiters and serving coffee and food. And of course, why are they there? They're looking at the other guy. They're
People
looking
watching
across the square. And every now and then somebody, a juggler, for example, will go in the center of Montpellier Square and juggle something, and everybody goes, you know, crazy. They want to see that. I mean, it is entertainment, and it is, as you say, a gathering space, and it is so interesting and exciting. You know, years ago, if you remember, Jolly Roger, way back when, used to have open-air restaurants on Kalakaua. And not to say it was at the same scale that Montpellier is, or any of those large European squares, but you could see that there was something magical happening there. That went away. A few years later, maybe it was during your watch, in front of the Mitsukoshi building. This
Oh,
was
that's
a big
right.
setback.
They had, right,
And
and
Planet Hollywood, you know, put some tables out. They got a permit, put some tables out there, and now they had table service. It was a small effort. But, you know, to me, just suppose we had anywhere in the city a great big square with restaurants, commercial restaurants that make a profit restaurants, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you imagine what would that happen?
You know, my wife and I were in Prague last year, and there's this huge square, and it didn't have trees, and didn't have the grass and the greenery, but it had outdoor dining. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because here, Hawaii and Honolulu is the perfect spot to enjoy the outdoors, because our weather is wonderful, right? What we did on 4th Street Mall, because there's, you know, all these little restaurants and shops and
This is another Bentley project, 4th Street Mall.
what we did was we said, well, we'll give you the tables, chairs, and umbrellas, and if you just own it and take it in every night and bring it back out in the day, then all of a sudden 4th Street Mall becomes an outdoor dining area. Yeah. And that worked too, and people loved it.
Works today.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think embracing the idea of indoor-outdoor is so much a part of our, you know, of our Hawaii climate and our culture. Honolulu Hale, which I spent a good part of my life, you know, these courtyards in the center, it's open to the sky.
Very nice architecture, actually.
Right. So those things are the elements that make, you know, spaces dynamic. It encourages people to use it, to feel safe, to talk to one another, to have discourse and conversations, even with perfect strangers.
Yeah. And civic engagement. You know, to go a step further on this, although I don't think it's happened much in Hawaii, in Europe, you know, a square is also a place for a rally.
Oh, sure.
A protest, but an Occupy kind of thing. And, you know, I think that the state really needs to revitalize itself on public awareness of political issues. And the way you do that is not by social media. I mean, you can get a crowd together with social media, but they don't understand it unless they actually talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the best talking is this kind of talking, you know, because the message is passing. And if you had a square, a space, a public space where people could do civic engagement, we'd have better civics, wouldn't we? You know,
very much so.
It's good for good for democracy. So, you know, I mean, is this in the future? Can we do this? Can we establish a Montpelier? Can we establish a square where people will feel comfortable, you know, having a speaker's corner, having a rally, making a speech?
I think our city and our state basically has to be embraced by the leadership, the governor, the mayor, and his cabinet. And it's a tough thing, you know, the budget is always tight, but they need to balance, you know, the daily demands of filling the potholes and keeping the buses running on time and getting the garbage picked up and having all the wastewater treatment plant. That's all very, very important. But don't forget about, you know, the rest of our city and the open spaces and the public streets and so forth. Kaka'ako is going to be, I think, wonderful. And I think it's that type of vision. And it doesn't have to be a top-down vision. We went to, you know, all the neighborhood boards and says, you know, what do you think is special about your neighborhood? Whether it's Kaimuki, Kalihi, Kailua, and what works and what doesn't work, right? And so we need to pay attention to that.
To neighborhoods.
Right. And you'll be surprised what we did, and we, like collectively the city and all the city workers and all the volunteers, what we did on Kalakaua Avenue basically changed Lower Street. And we partnered with, you know,
the Outrigger and all that.
Outrigger Hotel, and then once they did their, you know, renovation work, then the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center says, you know, it's time for us to change this look too because it's competitive.
I remember how that worked. It was a step transaction. They saw what happened on Lewis Street. And
right.
Said, well, we better get on board with this.
$1 billion worth of investment because we spent maybe $60–70 million fixing Kalakaua Avenue.
And it was getting a little
right.
old.
Oh yeah. And then once the private landowner says, "Hey, city's on board," okay, You know, we'll do our share and we'll do our part.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you know, people visiting and residents, it's a return of civic pride. I think that's the biggest thing that I find most rewarding, is that people says, gee, you know, our city looks good, feels good, there's fun things happening. I can go to Kapilani Bandstand, I can go to the beach, I can take my kids to watch a movie, you know, and also enjoy some of the cultural performances that were.
You know who else is on the panel? Carol Taylor. This is, you know, before your time in City Hall, but in the early 80s, Carol Taylor was the lawyer who saved Kapiolani Park. It was a legal battle, went to the Supreme Court of the state. Just as easily, Kapiolani Park could have been, you know, taken apart. That would have been a great tragedy, because it's the jewel, it's the central park, if you will, or at least of the Honolulu area. And luckily, Frank Padgett agreed with him, was sitting on the court at that time, and they saved it. And we're going to hear that story from Carol.
That's good. Public spaces are used, and of course, they're going to get worn out, and they need to be maintained to keep looking fresh and new. You know, the potted plants and the flowers, they need to be maintained, but it makes such a difference. When you go to any other city, it's like, oh my gosh, the Parks Director really is, you know, embracing this whole thing when, you know, when Portland is such a wonderful city. And then we took a lot of cues from that. The mayor and I and several council members went to Portland and said, well, what's so wonderful about this city that, you know, it's back on the map. And way back in the 50s, Portland was either going to be on the map or not on the map.
Right, it was a tipping point thing, and then they built that park in the middle.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Portland became revitalized.
Kalakaua Avenue, again, one more thing was that, what was I going to say? Once we did all those improvements, it made such a difference, and we had the private partners and private landowners, we had a 7-year tax holiday. I don't know if you remember that. You pay property.
For whom?
This is for all the private property owners to encourage them to make improvements. So we said,
great idea.
We're going to give you a 7-year tax holiday for improvements. You still have to pay property taxes, but we want you to fix up, clean up, redo, and if you can get your building permits within 2 years, you'll still have 5 years of tax-free on the improvements. So if you put in $100 million worth of improvements,
no tax.
No property taxes.
Great idea. It doesn't cost the city that much.
And everybody basically said, you know, we better do that and take advantage of this window.
We didn't do it again, though.
Right.
It's just the one time.
We should do it again, because it makes a big difference.
Well, I wanted to talk. We have about 8 or 9 minutes left, and I see how quick the time goes.
I know.
We'll talk about, you know, sort of the future. It seems to me that we are sitting on an aging city, because every city ages. Every place with infrastructure ages, and tick, 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 it's getting older. And the question is whether we're keeping up with it. You know, if we increase the height, the density, the population, if we increase the commercial activity around the city, we also need to increase the public spaces. You know? And to say that we have Kapiolani Park and we have some other places that you designed back when, and that they would last without expansion, I think it's not the answer. We always have to be doing what you did in that period. And so I'm interested in your thoughts about that. And if you were in charge today, what you would do, Ben?
Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. I think, you know, we can't just rest on our laurels. We always have to do something new and different and fresh, whether it's in Waikiki, whether it's downtown, whether it's in Kakako, whether it's in our smaller neighborhoods, so that one, residents feel good about, you know, the place they live. It's special, it's unique. Secondly, you know, it's kind of like Disneyland. Disneyland basically does something new almost every other year. So why? People come back, right? Oh, look, you know, this year they're showing movies on the beach and they did something on Kalakaua. Oh, and then they come back and says, hey, they're starting to do something on Alawai Canal. And then they can go to other parts and say, oh, did you ever visit, you know, the Waipio Soccer Complex and the Central Walk Park? Yeah. Central Walk Park is 269 acres that was, you know, I guess given to us by Castle and Cook, given to the city, given to the city because they were going to put houses there. And, you know, Mayor Harris And Mr. Murdoch at the time says, you know, can you really donate this land, 269 acres? I'm not sure whether the city paid something for it or not, but it's wonderful compared to, let's say, Alamana Beach Park or Kapilani Park is 70 acres. So here is a park that's 3 times the size of Kapilani Park. It's the Central Park as our Central Park in New York City or in New York.
In that area,
right,
yeah.
in that area.
Sure.
Same with the YPO soccer complex where, you know, kids were coming in from Mililani and Eva and Waianae going to Kapilani Park to play soccer. And, you know, there's thousands of kids
We
that now
gotta do
enjoy
better than that, yeah.
So I think that the lesson that I learned is that you always need to, you know, earmark some priorities that benefits, you know, the people as well as the residents. The Central Wild Park was, the vision there was that it was going to be a summer Olympic training facility.
Yeah, I didn't know.
We had, you know, 19 tennis courts. We had the Junior USTA Championship played there when the courts were first finished. And then we had an Olympic-sized swimming and diving facility so that people would come over here rather than go to Denver or other places to do their Olympic training.
That didn't play out.
We had, yeah, we're trying, you know, that should have.
What's it like now? How did it evolve to today?
They need to maintain it, and they need to promote it, and they need to encourage people to come here. When we had, you know, the soccer, let's say what is the acronym for the soccer?
AYSO?
AYSO.
Yeah.
We had the AYSO championship here at our YPO soccer complex. 19, you know, soccer fields, stadium, which is home to the Waihane's soccer team. And it brought so much revenues. You see, that's what people don't understand is that, you know, it was an international or a national competition. You know, they bring the families, they stay there for 4 or 5 days, they have the kids play soccer, but then the revenues to the visitor industry is incredible. So there was a great, you know, symbiotic relationship between recreation and culture and visitors and our economic development. So I think it all kind of was.
And it's really, it's the way we see ourselves. It's not only where we enjoy a quality of life, it's a statement by us collectively of who we are, what we do. And we cannot afford not to, you know, increase it, expand it, recapture it as necessary. You know, the other thing, you know, before we close, I just want to ask you your opinion about how, if at all, we could go ahead and do, even on a smaller scale, the Montpellier model. In other words, for example, suppose I said to you, as managing director today, I said, then take a block or 2 out of Chinatown, you know, sort of on the downtown side of Chinatown, and, you know, condemn it for the public good, and pay the money, whatever its value. A lot of those blocks are really not worth that much because they're not really developed very well. And make me a square like in Florence, and build me cafes and restaurants, or rent, you know, lease cafes and restaurants all around it, and make it a gathering place for anyone and everyone from all sides of the coin. And then when you've done that, take exactly the same plan, do that in Kaka'ako, do that in Mo'iliili, do that in Kalihi, make it a special Honolulu brand, a signature of how we do public spaces. What do you think? Could that be done? How much political resistance would there be?
Absolutely. I think, you know, rather than looking at projects and property isolated one at a time, I think that's where city and state government can actually implement a master plan so that buildings and squares relate and talk to one another. So it makes some sense rather than, well, here's an isolated project and I'm going to provide open space on the Mauka-Eva corner, and it's totally doesn't relate to another project right across the street. So wouldn't it be great to have that, you know, thread of open space and greenery from Mauka, which is the mountain, to Makai. Chinatown, we did Chinatown Gateway project, and it had housing, and it had a park, and it was right next to Hawaii Theater. And the vision there was, wouldn't it be great, we have this park, people have lunch there, and Wendy's used to be there at the Chinatown Gateway. And then Hawaii Theater, if they can do vignettes, you know, whether it's Shakespearean vignettes or something during lunchtime, you know, wouldn't that be great? Now, there is a cluster of new restaurants coming in Chinatown, but unfortunately, that space, you know, is kind of run down and not maintained. And then, of course, we have a really difficult homeless issue, and
I
that's
wanted
a,
to
that's
ask
a
you
whole new,
about that.
that's
You
a
know,
whole new
that's got to
discussion.
be one of the central issues in the program on May 21. You know, you want to have public spaces, you want to open it up, you want to dedicate it to the public. That means, you know, the concept be let everybody in. So who is going to come in first? And in the middle of the night, who's going to come in? It's going to be the homeless. Now, other cities, you know, take Florence or Montpellier, they do not have homeless living in their parks. How do we make public spaces without immediately submitting them to a use which actually, you know, turns everyone else off? How do we do that?
Having, let's say, a vibrant public space that's well used helps. The homeless issue across our state, and especially in Honolulu, is very, very difficult. When I was managing director, we try to tackle that as well. And you know, all we're doing, and I agree with a lot of people who says, well, all we're doing is moving them around. When you say, no, you can't come here, we're closing down the street, you can't sleep on the sidewalk and so forth. But it's a much, much larger problem.
Sure.
And it comes in several steps. You know, there's those who really needs job training, those who really needs, you know, single parents need a shelter, those who really needs the medication. And so the mayor and I suggested that there should be one campus, one-stop shop, so that we don't have all these homeless, these nonprofit organizations trying to just take care of certain segments of the homeless.
Yeah, that doesn't really help. I mean, if you bring food, for example, to a homeless encampment in Ala Moana, you're telling them to stay there.
Mm.
You know, and I mean, a very charitable organization might do exactly that, not realizing. I remember this issue was, you know. But are you suggesting that you put them all in one place?
No, not at all. You know, the city had, and Jeremy Harris was the managing director, had a program under Mayor Fossey, Operations Hands Up. It's not a handout, it's a hands up. We provide them the shelter, we provide the job training, we get them back into the mainstream of the workforce. Now, you can't do that for everyone. Some people just will not, does not
stay
want
there,
to work, yeah. But there are so many that basically says, gee, I just got laid off, I can't afford, you know, such and such. And there's a lot of parents and maybe single parents or even couples with kids living on the beach, you know, out in Waianae or whatever, or even in downtown. We need to grab those and say, hey, you know, how do we, let's say, make it, how do we job train you and find you a job, and the private sector can help and get them back into the workforce and provide affordable housing and transitional housing, you know, transitional housing, so that once they're back up on their feet, you know, they can get back in the workforce. That might take care of maybe 40% of the homeless, but it'll be a shame because I think most people want to be productive, and just because they've had hard times, and I know in the early 90s there was a recession and there was, you know, there was a lot of high unemployment, and those are the ones we need to capture right away.
Because they've been out there too long.
Right,
Yeah.
and you can get them back into the workforce and being productive.
But something you said really, really touches me, and I think it's the use of the public space by the public. That means all the public, the regular public. And if I gave you my model, it's you know, a big plaza and a juggler in the middle, and a lot of restaurants and, you know, cafes and whatnot. The very fact there were so many people, I mean, well-attended, the very fact there were so many people there would probably solve the problem of the homeless for that area. Because the homeless get embarrassed when they're surrounded.
They like to be left alone.
They like to be left alone.
This
This is an important process that we have to understand. And if that were the case, if I gave you Montpellier sitting, you know, on the way into Chinatown or in Mo'iliili or in Kaka'ako, that would probably draw people, and the homeless wouldn't want to be there, and then we would have what we want. I guess the question then is, you know, raising the money, doing the political will, putting it as a top priority for city and state, and making people aware that they've got to get behind this, or they will ultimately, you know, we'll fall behind the curve.
That's right. I think one of the things that they need to think about is how do we keep the hygiene and the health of the homeless. One of the things, and we met, once a month for almost 6 months to try to solve this problem with a lot of nonprofit organizations. And the outcome was they need a place to put their stuff. And it's not shopping carts full of things. It's just a place to put their stuff, a place to keep clean and shower and do some very, very fundamental things for hygiene. And that's the first step. Otherwise, they will be using our streets and parks as bathrooms.
And displacing us.
Right, and that's,
So the challenge is to Larry Ellison. Larry, if you want to do something really good, why don't you build 200 bathrooms, and I'm sure.
it has to be maintained.
And maintain them.
and they would abuse it. And when, our parks and so forth, we have a lot of people abusing our bathrooms in the parks, and they just take it over. Yeah. I get on our parks director and I says, hey, how come there's no toilet paper? They just take the whole wheelbarrow of toilet paper out. It's gone. And so it's a very, very difficult, challenge running the city. But you have to keep at it. You can't give up.
Right. And you have to keep on working on the public spaces or you lose them.
That's right.
Yeah. That's Ben Lee, a former city manager of Honolulu, did some great things in his time. Now with Clifford Planning and Architecture, here on Sustainable Hawaii, we're talking about the state of our public space in anticipation of a program by the same name in our downtown forum on May 21st, Thursday, a couple of weeks from now at Laniakea. So sign up on ThinkTechHawaii.com and you can see Ben in person.
Jay, I think that's going to be a great forum. I know a lot of the people there, and there are architects, planners, George Atta from the Department of Planning and Permitting, who's now the planning director of that department. That'd be great. I think it'll be very insightful as far as, well, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Right? What's the next step?
Where do we go from
How
here?
do we keep our city exciting and vibrant?
Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
Thank
you
you.
for today. Thank you for then.
I enjoy being at ThinkTech. I think
I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech Week. First, why don't you consider coming to our downtown forum on May 1st in Laniakea. This time we're covering public spaces in Hawaii, how to plan, design, fund, build, manage, maintain, and preserve them. How important are they to our urban and civic experience? How they help us realize the new openness we've been hoping for in our society in Hawaii. Fritz Johnson, an architect. David Miller, an architect with Architects Hawaii. Glenn Miura, an architect with Glenn Miura Architects. Ian Sanderson, a lawyer with Carl Smith Ball. Carol Taylor, a lawyer with Taylor, Liang and Chi. Brittany Ta'amu Miyashiro, the Box Jelly. Scott Wilson, the American Institute of Architects. Sponsored by Hawaii Business Magazine. Sign up today on ThinkTechHawaii.com. I hope you're watching our ThinkTech Daily News with Donna Blanchard. She reports to us every day on news of interest to Hawaii. Check it out every day on ThinkTech and on youtube.com/ThinkTechHawaii. You might also want to check out our radar news with Sachi Slomov. Sachi's great, and you'll see what I mean the first time you watch her. See Hawaii style in radar news. Check it out on ThinkTech and youtube.com/ThinkTechHawaii. ThinkTech broadcasts live noon to 5 every weekday and sometimes more. Go to the home drop-down on ThinkTechHawaii.com for our regular daily calendar. You'll be glad you did. Or sign up for our daily email advisories at the bottom of our homepage and get our advisories every day. Great content, relevant to Hawaii on ThinkTech. But there's more. We broadcast our earlier shows all night long, so you can always watch ThinkTech on ThinkTechHawaii.com. And you can always see our videos on demand on YouTube.com. ThinkTech, going global, coming to a continent near you. And yes, we have Twitter. Have questions, comments, or thoughts about our subjects? Tweet us at ThinkTechHi, H-I. Our hosts have instant access to your tweets and your questions, comments and thoughts, and will respond to you and ask their guests to respond to you on the air. ThinkTech, Twitter, totally interactive. Interact with us on ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech, and I approve this message. If you approve of it, or if it piques your interest in any way, take a look and check us out on thinktechhawaii.com, youtube.com, or ThinkTech High, and we'll be there for you. ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you soon.